What's up my nerds, it's Bozy, your Shopify developer freelancer from Germany, and in today's video we are going to build a storefront collection filter from scratch so that you can give your customers of your store the ability to filter products on a collection page. We are going to find out what you need to create filters, how to create filters in the backend, and then use Liquid and JavaScript to create dynamic storefront filters so you can filter products without a page reload. As always, all the code I write in this video I'm going to upload into a repository. So if you want to code along or just have a look, check out the description for more. Without further ado, let's jump right in. When we visit the documentation for storefront filtering, you can see that first you need to check if your theme supports filtering. I won't go into this, but basically you just need to have a theme that supports Online Shop 2.0 dynamic sections. I think 99% of themes today have this feature, so like I said, I won't go into this. The next thing is how to create filters, and here we can use the Shopify search and discovery app. Let me show you. To download the search and discovery app, you can go to your store, click on apps, and then go to the Shopify app store. Then there you can just simply search for search and discovery app, and here download it. I already have it in the store, so I don't need to do this anymore. And when you downloaded this search and discovery app, you can simply go there, then click on filters. And here in this section, you can set up your filters in the backend. Availability and price, I think, are the standard ones that are already installed when you first open the app, but you can actually add filters or remove these. So let's try to add a filter. And what you can see here is first you have to select a source. There's basically multiple different sources you can select from. There are 4 types of product filters. It's the standard ones, which are just standard information of the product. For example, the brand, category, the product type, and more filters, which are the tags of products. Then you have the product option type, which is a product option of the product. So we have the color, denominations, material, size, and so on. All the product options where you created variants for a product. Then we have the product meta fields, so additional information that you created as meta fields for that product. And then we have category meta fields, which are meta fields created by Shopify for better categorization. For example, also the color. And if you used other category meta fields, they will also show up here. Now let's say we want to use the size product option, and here you get all the sizes you used throughout your products. So let's save this now. Maybe create some more. Let's also use the material product meta field that I created with also the materials. And of course, let's use the color, but we use the category meta field because I already used this in different products. And the cool thing is that we already have colors set up with meta objects. So this is a really good thing. Let's also save this. You can also rearrange these and then click save. Now we have set up the filters in the back end, but how do we get a filtering system in the front end now? Let me show you. For this, I start a development server. If you don't know how to develop locally on your machine, go watch my video on the Shopify CLI and learn how to do it. All right, I opened up my development theme, went to the collection page, and the collection page is just this collection section in here. Pretty basic. We have a collection title, and also for the product in the collection products, we just simply display an image, the title, and the price. We're also on the all collection, which is basically the collection for all the products in the shop. But we still are not seeing any filtering. We first have to build the filtering. And the cool thing is that Liquid already gives us some objects to work with. When we go to the collections object in the Liquid documentation, we can see that we have a filters parameter. And the filters parameter returns an array of filter. So all the filters for the collection. When we click on this, we can see that we have a lot of other properties we can use to display all the filters on the collection page. Filters are only working on collection templates or pages, and also on the search template or the search page. Since both is basically the same, we just focus on the collection page for now. Before we proceed, let's try to first display all the filters and the label for it. We can simply go to our section and create a new div call class collection filters. Then let's also create a heading, collection filters heading, to just display we are seeing the filters. I'm just hard coding this for now. And below the heading, we say we have another class, collection filters content. What we can do now is loop through the filters. So we say for filter in collection filters. And here let's just output the filter label for now. When we reload now, we can see that we have this section here now with the filters heading. And then for every filter, we have displayed the filter label. And as you can see, these labels are the same for the filters that we already created before in the backend. So the color, material, size, availability, and price. I quickly added the CSS to make it more distinctive. Also, when I write CSS, I won't explain everything in detail. You can just see it in the code I provided in the description. Now we have the label for the filter, but we also want to output the filter values. When we go back to the documentation for the filter object, we can see that we at the bottom have values. But before outputting the values, we also have to look at the filter type because we have 3 different types. We first have the Boolean, which is like 2 values, true or false. Then we have the list, so a list of filter values. And then we have a special type, which is price range, which is only applicable for one filter, which is the price filter. We get into the price filter later in specific. But for now, let's create another element and let's call this just collection filter. And then here, let's say we have another element, collection filter label, where we output the label. And below we have another element where we have the collection filter options. In these collection filter options, we want to separate the list and Boolean values and the price range. So here we can check if filter type is list or filter type is Boolean, else and if. Here we're doing nothing for now. And for the list and Boolean types, we can now loop through the values of the filter. So for value in filter values, and for now just output the value label. When we reload now, we can see that we have the filter label and inside we have all the values except for the price because we handle this later. We displayed all the filters on the collection page, but how do we actually apply filtering to the collection? When we go back to the documentation for the filter, we can see that we have a param name. The param name is the URL parameter for the filter. For example, ... The same thing we have for a value. We also have a param name, which is basically the same. So how filtering basically works is you take the URL and append the param name of that filter plus the value of the value. So the value for the URL parameter. And you can see it again, the value is paired with the param name property. So if you want to filter, for example, for the carbon material, you would need to use the material param name in combination with the carbon value. Let's create a string in here where we say we have the value param name is the value. Now we have this math right here, but with this example, I can show you how this works. So for example, for the size S, we can simply copy this, take the URL and append it to the URL. And as you can see now, we have filtered all the products that contain the size S. We can also do this with the material fiber. So just append the material fiber. And now we have filtered for the material fiber. Of course, you can also filter for multiple values. You can just do this and append the search params with an and. And now you're filtering for the material fiber and also the option size S. Now we have to build a functionality so the customer obviously doesn't want to change the URL by himself, but rather how we can do it for him. To help us with the URL building, there's actually another property we can use for the value. We can see that we have a URL to add and also a URL to remove. The URL to add is basically just the current page URL with the filter value parameter added. So this is everything done for us. What we could do now is just take an anchor element with an href and say value URL to add. Here we say the value label. And when we reload now and remove, of course, all of this, then we can just click on carbon. As you can see, we now filtered for the carbon material. When we click metal, it instantly gets added to the URL without us actually doing anything, because it is the value URL to add and it constructs the URL for us. Now, of course, you would need to implement a remove element, but before we proceed, there's actually another problem. When we click a filter, the page reloads all the time and we don't want this. To prevent this, we actually can use the section rendering API. I already did a video on this, so check it out before you do this so you understand everything what I'm doing right now. First of all, let's transform this into checkboxes. So the customer can click the checkboxes if he wants to add a filter or not. Let's create another div. Let's say collection filter option. And inside, let's create an input with the type of checkbox. And with the ID, let's say the filter label, because we have to make it unique. Handle and dash value handle. So all the IDs are unique. Then the name, say filter label handle. The value is the value handle. And then for later to work with it, let's add two data attributes. One, the add URL, which is the value add URL to add, and the data remove URL is the value URL to remove. Then if a checkbox input is already checked, we can do the following. We can use the if value active, because in the documentation, when we go to the value, we can see active returns true if the value is currently active. And the theme can check if a value is currently active by its URL. If the filter value is in the URL, then the value is active. Okay, we can say end if, and if the value is active, then we have checked. Then of course we have the label. This is for the ID. And inside, let's say we show the value label. Now when we look at this, we can see we have all the checkboxes in here. Nothing happens yet, so first we have to give it functionality with JavaScript. For this, let's create a new file, which is collection filters.js. And of course, we have to implement it in here. And in the collection filter.js, we now want to create a custom HTML element for the filter functionality. If you also don't know what custom HTML elements are, you should also check out my video on the custom HTML elements. So again, to understand everything that I'm doing right now. For this, we can simply create a class. Let's call this collection filters, extends HTML element with the constructor, calling the super, and of course custom elements define with the tag name and the class in here. And let's say console log filters added to just check if everything is working. And of course we now need to wrap everything in the collection filters. Now when we go in here and reload, we can see in the dev console we have the filters added logged, so everything works perfectly fine. What we want to do now is when a customer clicks an input, so changes, then we want to re-render the collection page and also append the parameter with the value. To do this, let's create our connected callback. And in here we can define all the filter inputs inside the filter mechanism. You can say this filter inputs is this query selector input. Then of course, because we for sure have the handle click functionality later, we can first define the handle click. So it gets bound to this handle click by this. And then for every filter input, we can say input at event listener. And here you see change because it is an input. We call this handle click functionality. Let's go ahead and console log change so we can see it works. Of course, I forgot to put query selector all in here. When we reload now and click the inputs, we can see that we have logged changed. Everything works perfectly fine. As I said, we want to re-render the collection page on every change. First, we need to create our URL for the fetch call. Let's put the event in here and say const input is the event current target. Then we can create a new URL object. And in here we can say, okay, if the input is checked, we obviously want to have the add URL. If it's not checked, so it gets from checked to unchecked, we want to use the remove URL. To check this, we can say input checked. And if so, we take the input dataset add URL. Otherwise, we take the input dataset remove URL. And this is based on the window location origin. Let's quickly check our URL to string. And here again, let's reload and click on here. And we can see the URL is now the collections, all collection, plus the param name, plus the value. Perfect. Now we have the URL, but we also need the section ID parameter. So we can actually re-render the collection page. We can say URL search params set, and since we only want to fetch one section, we can use the section underscore ID, and then we need to use the section ID. We could now use the collection, so the name of the section, as the section ID, but that would render the section statically. And maybe settings change, blocks change. Let's use the dynamically rendered section ID. As we know, this is hidden in the section object of the template. So what we can do is take another data attribute, let's say section ID is section ID, and we add this to the collection filters element. When we go back now, we can also add a get section ID function, and here we just return this data set section ID. Now we can go here and use this section ID because this returns the data attribute. Now that we have the full URL, we can do our fetch call and say fetch URL to string, then response. Then we can take the response and just return it as text because we are only fetching a single section. And then we can take the HTML, create our temporary div, so document create element div, and say temp div inner HTML is our new HTML. So the HTML of the collection section with the filter applied. Now everything we have to do is just replace the, let's say, collection inner element with the new content of the collection with the filter applied. So let's say document query selector collection inner HTML is temp div query selector collection inner HTML. And now when we reload the page and click on a filter, we should see that the collection gets filtered, and that without a reload. Now what we also need to do, of course, is remove the section ID parameter because we don't use it anymore, and also update the URL. So let's say URL search params delete, and here we delete the section ID parameter. And also let's take window history and then push state, take the empty object, the empty string, and then the URL to string. Now let's reload and check, and if we click brown, you can see that the URL parameter is added. And also when we click white, the URL parameter for white is also added. It's just too long to show, but it is there. And the cool thing is you don't have to manually construct the URL yourself with the value URL to add and URL to remove. You already have the full URL for the filter change. Now, before we make this a little bit more appealing to look at, let's check the price. Let's go back again into the liquid documentation for the filter, and you can see some more properties, for example, max value, min value, and here we can say returns a value only for the price range type filters. There's also, for example, range max, and you can see the price range filter is a little bit special. Also, when we go into filter value, there's even more that is special to the price range filter. For the param name, we have two values, which is for the min and the max value. This can get tricky, but the main message is for the price range, you have a min price the customer is filtering for, and a max price the customer is filtering for, and you want to get all the products that are in this span. So it's better to show you than actually explain it. Let's jump back in our code, and we already outputted all the values for the filter type list and boolean. Now let's handle the price range. So let's take again this filter option. Let's also create another div just to differentiate it for collection filter price range. Now the best way to display ranges in HTML is using inputs with a type of range. Then we can also use the additional properties to build a slider-like functionality to define which is the min and max range the customer wants to select. The best thing is to create two inputs, one for the min range and one for the max range. There's also another problem here because all the values for this range are with decimals, so with cent values. The filter for it though is in full values, so without decimals. So you first have to transform all these ranges so you can use it later in your functionality. So let's create our first input for the min range. And let's say this is type of range. And the ID this time is just a filter min value param name, because this is unique. The name is the same. Now the min for the range is for the min range 0, because below 0 you can't go, and this is the minimum value you want to give for a min range. Then the max of that minimum range is the filter range max, because you don't want to go further than the maximum range of the price. Then the value is 0 or the actual min value that is currently selected. And you can display this by using the min value and the value of that. So we can say if there is a filter min value, the value is that. Otherwise, it is 0. Then we can take the same thing and do this for max. And here it's also if there is a max value already applied to the collection filter, then we take this value. But if not, we want to have the maximum range. Now to show you this, we have two sliders for the minimum range and for the max range. And this obviously doesn't work right now because it's a little bit more tricky than the other values. The problem is because for the range values, we don't have a URL to add, because Liquid doesn't know what the customer will select. So for example, he selects minimum range $10, but he doesn't know, so we have to build it ourselves. In this case, I also want to add the data param name. So this is the filter max value param name. And for the min value, it is the min value param name. Now we need to go back to our functionality and create our URL based on if it's a checkbox or the price range was selected. How we can do this, let's change this a little bit up and say URL. So we have not a constant assignment. And then we can check if the input has a data set of add URL or a remove URL. If so, we do the stuff from before, and else we want to handle the price inputs. So how I like to do it is, first of all, let's define the price inputs for the element. Let's say this min range is this query selector, and let's give these some distinctiveness by using a data attribute. Let's say data min value, and here we have data max value. So the min range is input type range, and there the data min value. And then the same thing for the max range. Then we can go in here and say URL is new URL based on the location href to get the full URL with the already added collection filters, and then say URL search params first delete this min range dataset param. Also do the same for the max range, and then set it again with the new value. Let's say this min range, then this min range value. And the same goes for the max range. Now, when we change a slider, we can see that all the params get added. The only problem is they're a little bit buggy, as you can see, and trust me, it is complicated, but like I said before, the actual values have decimals, but the filter itself doesn't accept decimals, only full money numbers. So we have to do some changes in here to make it properly work. What I like to do is just do some assignments on conditions on here. If filter min value is already here, then we assign the min value to the filter min value, but divided by 100 to just get rid of the decimals and make it a round number. Else we assign it a 0. The same thing we're doing for the max value. Instead of the 0, we take the filter range max. This also divided by 100. Then also change the max value for the min range to divide it by 100 and round it. But since it rounds down, we have to add a plus for the max range. Then since we define the min range value, we can say value is just the min range, min value. And the same thing we have to do down here. And the value is just the max value. Sorry, of course, it is +1 and +1. And now after fixing the decimal issue, when we change now, we can see price range officially works perfectly fine. And you can also add now different filters, and you will see that all the price filters still stay, but we also have the other filters going on. Now I showed you everything on how to create a properly working storefront filtering system, but this looks still a little bit ugly, so let's make this a little bit more beautiful. Let's go. First of all, before we do anything else, let's create some accordion tabs so all the filters are not open already and clutters all the page, so the customer can select what he wants to expand and what not. For this, I quickly created this accordion toggle custom HTML element, which has a header, a content, and when you click on the header, it expands and retracts when you click it again. I don't go into the details of this because this is not part of the video, but you can, as always, check out the code in the description. Then let me also quickly change the HTML layout on here. All right, I just wrapped everything in this accordion toggle with an accordion header and a accordion content. Now when we click these, the filters expand. We have just one problem now, because when we open an accordion with the filter values and we click a value, the page re-renders, but also the accordions re-render, and because they don't have the open state, they get rendered closed. So let's fix this real quick. Before we replace the page with the new HTML, let's first get all the accordion elements that are open. We can do this by first setting all the tabs as an array to check. So let's say this filter tabs is array from this query selector all, and then here accordion toggle. And here, before we replace everything, we can say open filters, say this filter tabs map. Here we take the value and index, and say when the value class list contains accordion open, because that is the class that we give the accordion when it's open. And we have the index, otherwise we have -1. Of course, we return that value, so index or -1 for that value. And here we filter where the index is not -1. This makes sure we get the indexes of the array of the open filters that are open. Then we can take the temporary div and apply the changes. Open filters for each, we just have the index in there. Then we can define the current filter, temp div. Here is the temp div, query selector all accordion toggles of that index. And then we can say the current filter, class list add accordion open. And after we did all this, then we replace the old content with the new content where also the accordions are open. So let's check this. We open an accordion, click brown, and it stays open. And we click a size and both stay open. The next thing I want to do is when I click a filter, maybe other filter values are not available anymore. So there are no products for this combination. When we go to the documentation for a filter value, we can see that we have a count property where it says the number of results related to the filter value. So we could say if the count is 0, then we disable the filter. Let's go ahead into our option and say if value count is 0, then we say is disabled. And when we have a collection filter option with is disabled, then we have this opacity and pointer events of none, so we cannot click it. And when we reload and click a color or a material, and we can see, okay, these are not available for the color blue. So this is a good UI decision to show the customer what's available or not. Then another thing I want to do is show which filters are currently active. In the documentation for the filter object, we have the active values. So we have the values of that filter that are currently active, and we get an array of filter value objects again. How we can do this? Let's go under the filters caption and create a new element where we save all the active filters. Let's say collection filters, active values. And first we have to loop through the filters again. For filter in collection filters, then of course for every value in filter active values. And here we can again take an input with its label, but only with the data remove URL because we don't want to edit. So we can create some small pills. So when we click on it, the the filter gets removed. I just quickly wrote this here. So we have an input with data remove URL, which is the value URL to remove, but it's hidden, and all this stuff. And for the label, we just have the label with the value label and a small X, so it indicates we can remove something. When we go to the page now and click a filter, we can see this little bubble here, which appears, and then we can simply click these again and they get removed from the filtering. So also pretty cool little gimmick for the customer to see which filters are currently active and how to remove them. Then what you can also do is, instead of taking these checkboxes, we can also add some swatches so it looks nicer. Let me show you how we can do this. So for the collection filter option, let's add another class, which is called collection filter swatch. So we can do display flags, align items, and the gap is 0.0 rem. Then first we can hide the input. So let's do input display none, and the label, just give a small padding, a border radius and a border just to make it distinctive, and a cursor pointer. Then of course, if we have a checked input, let's change the background color to black, the color to white. Now we have these, and as you can see, these work perfectly fine. When a filter is active, we have the different colors on them and these little pills, but also the spacing needs to be fixed. And what you also can do is, instead of using the names for the colors, you can actually show the real colors. Since we're using the category meta field, the filter values actually get a swatch parameter. Because when we go to the backend meta objects and go to the standard product attributes, for each color, we have either a color value or an image that we can display. And how we can define this is check if the filter label is color, or however you want to check this. We can basically take the same approach, just add something else. We can say collection filter swatch color, and remove the label from here. So let me show you how this looks now. Let's also add some CSS to make this look better. We have these circles right now, and what we can do is, for the label, if the value swatch color, because as I said before, for a value we can also have a swatch parameter, which gives us a swatch drop and the safe color or image for that. So we can say if the value swatch color is there, we can say the style is background color. Here is the value swatch color. But also, else if the value swatch image is there, we can take the style, the background image of that image with an image URL, and of course the URL parameter, and else we can use the background color as just the value label, because in CSS you can use words as colors. Now when we reload, we have these cool color swatches and everything looks pretty neat when we add the stuff and remove the stuff again. Now for the last thing, if you want to find out how I created this cool price selector here, we have a range of min and max on the same line and this cool little money counter on here. Check out the code in the description and download the repository. Now you know how to create a storefront filter for your Shopify theme. I gave you all the tools and now it's your time to execute and build your own filtering solutions. If you have more questions about this topic, let me know in the comments and I'm getting back to you as soon as possible. As always, I would be really happy if you would subscribe to my channel, because I take a lot of time creating these examples and exercises for you so you get better as a Shopify developer. But if this is not enough for you, I'm actually working on my own Shopify Developer Academy, where I want to teach you how to become a Shopify developer, or at least better at it. So if you are interested, go check out the description and sign up. And lastly, of course, you can check out my Discord community, where I'm building a community for Shopify developers. We talk a lot about Shopify, help each other out, and we solve problems together. So if you're interested, also check out the description. See you next time. Bye bye.